this deck is really just a constant pressure beast, if you will. Hello, Snugglebugs. Welcome back to the Hearthstone video for the month of July, where today we're actually going to be taking a look at what I think the top 5 decks are to climb to Legend for this month. Now, I do want to say that how I have accomplished this is with hsreplay.net, looking at the meta, not necessarily the individual decks, although I have the top performing or most popular decks listed here in those archetypes, but really the top 5 archetypes. I included all regions, and I'm doing this from Diamond through Legends. Now, if there are other specific rank stats that you're questioning, ask me in the comments down below, and I'll make sure to take a look at those, maybe provide them to you in case it is different, vastly different. But I feel like from my research today, trying to put this video together, most seem to be relatively close to the same, but take that with a little bit of a grain of salt as we get started here. So number 5 on our list right now with a just over 50%, 52.05% overall. And to make note, this here is the most popular deck of the archetype that I have right here. All deck lists will be in the description down below if you are curious. And I've shown this video deck on the channel, but for those who aren't super familiar with Mech Paladin, really the idea is very tempo heavy, very either buff your hand or buff your board, and you just kind of play minions on curve, and then hopefully you overwhelm your opponent. And Bubble Butt is a very huge component of, like, if you're kind of already ahead and you want to win more, or they break your bubbles and then you get to get more bubbles on your minions. So I think even though they had nerfed Lightforged Cariel not too long ago, sorry, keep that on there, and it makes it now cost 8 mana instead of 7, it's just too powerful of a card, so it's also a good finisher. And I just overall think that this is a solid, pretty straightforward deck to climb with. There's no crazy plays, which maybe means it's not as flashy for some people, but for consistent games, for a deck that's pretty good to learn, I would recommend the Mech Paladin. And number 4 is actually the Beast Druid, not a Ramp Druid, not the Prestor Druid. Number 4 is the Beast Druid, which I think has been picking up back in popularity as of late, but this deck is kind of like the aggro druid, beast druid, I guess, before the Arbor Up got lost, just without Arbor Up, obviously. With the idea being that you just fill your board with a bunch of cheap minions, you do composting to draw a bunch of cards, and you flood them later with Herald of Nature, or buff them later with Herald of Nature, versus the Arbor Up. Effectively is kind of the replacement. And really, that's just it. If you're interested in seeing a bit of gameplay on this channel before, especially the next expansion comes out, let me know. I've actually not given this deck, the specific deck, a try, but I'd be interested to try it out. So let me know if you're interested. But yeah, there's again not too many crazy flashy plays. Maybe some stuff with Oracle of Elune and the Frostsaber Matriarch, but similar to the Mech Paladin, the goal is to try to get as many of these things out, hope that they stick, buff them with Herald of Nature, and just get your opponent's health down to 0. And our number 3 deck here for climbing is 52.92% win rate. Again, with all those parameters discussed earlier on in the video, is the big Spell Mage. This one hasn't changed a lot, really, since it's kind of came to be popular, say, about a month or almost 2 months ago at this point. But as it says on the tin, the point of the big Spell Mage is effectively to use your early game tools to stay alive, potentially gain some armor, use things like Fire Watch Post to sort of mess with your opponent in the early game, just to live long enough to get out your Rune of the Archmage is the more particular spell out of the 2, at least from my experience. And your Grey Sage Parrots to replay those over and over again. Blended Stonehearth to draw and discount them, of course. And you can, of course, use the Drakefire Amulet to get multiple big dragons out, but I feel like, at least from my experience and from what I've seen other players have, the multiple Root of the Archmage, I guess is all I'll say, tends to be just enough. 20 right now, 20 mana worth of mage spells that pretty much always target your opponent unless they have nothing on the board, just is really strong. The pool, of course, will be increased with the Castle of Nathria, so that maybe the potency of this deck will go down. Only time will tell, but as of right now, this deck would be a solid choice, especially if you're someone who's interested in the RNG side of things, a little random, little hecticness. As in my opinion, this is one of the few decks on this list that actually have those big bursty plays, where the rest of them tend to be a lot more just sort of play out what you got type of decks. But with that, I'm actually going to throw out an honorable mention here in the middle before we get to number 2 and number 1, and that's at a surprisingly 51.71% win rate, the Quest Rogue. We had played this not that long ago on our channel as well as it was requested, and I admit I did not perform that well with the deck, so I don't know if this is just a few people who mastered the deck, because this one also was one of the smaller sample sizes, sitting in only at about 5,000 games, where the rest of them had, say, 30, 40,000 games played. That maybe there's just a handful of people who are really good at this deck that are driving this win rate up, but either way, it shows that it's possible, and I just wanted to throw it in there as an honorable mention. For number 2, nobody's probably, well, I shouldn't say nobody, a lot of people probably are not going to be happy with me saying this, but Quest Hunter seems to be the second highest win rate deck of the season, sitting here right now at 53.72%. And I guess for those who are not familiar, you use the quest, you use spells with damage to complete your quest, and then it lets you reset your hero power for free over and over and over again as you play spells. So then it's filled with cheap spells, and with the release of Prince Renethal, sorry if we're going a little bit too fast with the words, but with the release of Prince Renethal, the fact that this can actually have 40 health allows you to get those extra few turns, as one of the ways that this deck used to lose was people would beat it down before it could complete the quest, but now it kind of gets those extra turns, and it really just has mostly the same cards in it, meaning that it's almost as consistent, so it doesn't lose the consistency. The fact that you start in your hand with quest lines means that if this is the only super important card for you to have at any given time, you always start with it, so 40 cards does not really affect your total. The number 1 deck to climb with for the month of July, as of right now, at least if you're looking at highest win rate, is the Beast Hunter. Now, we've also recently shown this on the channel. We've gone against this a ton on the channel, as it is a very popular deck. And almost not to repeat myself, but to go along with what I was saying about the Mech Paladin, and even to quite a bit of extent the Beast Druid, this deck is really just a constant pressure beast, if you will, where you start by trying to have your 1-2 drop minions, or maybe a buff spell on a 1-drop minion, and the hope is, of course, to maybe get things like your harpoon gun, in order to dredge up expensive beasts for cheap. But even if you don't, to be perfectly honest with you, the fact that so many beasts in here have rush, and then you have, of course, your pet collectors to bring those out. The most success I've actually had is with Rat King, and then you revive pet the Rat King, and then, of course, there's even the late game bombs. You know, you have your constant value of Beaststalker Tavish, and then you have your King Crush, and I would say the Wing Commander Ikman to me is one of those comeback mechanics if you end up falling behind and you have some beasts left in your deck. But overall, the Beast Hunter is just a solid, well-rounded, it's got good opening, middle, and end game. It does have some flashy plays, not quite to the extent of the RNG, I would say, of the big Spell Mage, but overall, again, it just kind of is one of those decks. I think the reason it has such a high win rate is it doesn't really rely on random RNG, I guess, randomly generated things. Obviously, there are some impacts like what you get off your revived pet, what you get off your pet collectors and that sort of thing, or your harpoon gun. But overall, it's just a solid, you play the best thing you got in your hand and hope that it's better than what your opponent has. And it just generally is, like most of the time. So that's why I think this deck is seeing the number 1. With that, before we sign off, I would like to say, like I mentioned before, either if you are interested in seeing to see if the list is different for what rank you're at, let me know in the comments down below. If you would like to see any of these decks played, let me know as well. I'll give it a shot. With only about, I think, a week and a half, 2 weeks left before the next expansion comes out, I can't imagine this deck meta will change too much as we're preparing for those cards to come out. So thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.